Hello everyone, I'm Esther and I would like to welcome you to the latest session of Navozyme's Blue Seas webinar series. For those of you who may not know, at Navozyme we are developing cutting-edge technology solutions to accelerate maritime decarbonization and to raise the safety and the productivity of the global maritime industry. In this edition of the Blue Seas webinar series, we will explore new nuclear's role in the energy transition. New nuclear signifies the latest innovations available today for harnessing nuclear energy in a safer manner. Today, we are glad to have with us nuclear expert Dr. Victor Nian, co-founder and CEO of the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources, and Jan Holm, Executive Vice President of Seaborg Technologies. Today's session on the new nuclear's role in energy transition will be moderated by Anjaney Borwankar, Navozyme's co-founder and Chief Executive. So without further delay, I'll pass it over to you now, Anjan.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Could I have also Dr. Victor Nian and Jan Holm on the screen with their videos on? Yes. Hi, Jan. I can see you perfectly.
I can start my video.
Okay. We just tested it a few seconds ago. Take your time. That's all right.
All right.
There you go. You're looking great. So first, let me welcome the audience here. Those who are not familiar with this Blue Seas webinar series that we call. The purpose of this webinar is really to raise awareness about what's going on with energy transition. Decarbonization, as we've heard the word now, it's become so common, but what does that really mean for all of us? And Navozyme, of course, works in a lot of different areas on the theme of digitalization and decarbonization, but we can't get away from energy transition. Energy is required for our very lives. I think life itself depends on energy, so it's an understatement that this is a very important topic. But I'm super excited today to have two experts on a type of energy which is often misunderstood. And it's misunderstood because we've got a lot of legacy issues with this nuclear energy, right? So even when I met Jan, in Singapore recently, and he educated me about what is new nuclear, and I kind of coined this word, so I'm not sure if it's already vocabulary which is used commonly, but it's something to really repackage nuclear, and we'll understand this much better by the end of today's webinar, right? So this is the purpose. But again, today we have a fantastic audience. Registrations have come literally from all parts of the globe. I was looking at the list, from Azerbaijan, Australia, US, and of course the usual suspects, Singapore, India, Spain, these three countries, because we are also very active in these places, but also many other places, which I won't go through all the list of countries, it will be really long. But there's clearly a lot of interest on this topic. So the audience, again, for your benefit, we will also be recording this session, and you will have access to the slides that Dr. Victor and Jan will be actually showing. We'll get a lot from this session, right? It's also important that you start thinking about the questions. You can already post them on the chat. I'll act as the moderator. My job today is really easy because, we've got some experts in the room, professionals who are very good at presenting and educating the audience about this topic. So I'll be silent after this, except, asking a few questions. And I'll be looking at the chat as well. Okay, so feel free to, at any time, keep posting your questions, and I'll try to take as many of them later on. The format will be as follows. We'll have Dr. Victor Nian go first, and then followed by Jan Holm. Each will speak for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll get into a conversation, all of us. Okay, so that's basically how the format is. Now, I'm going to ask Dr. Victor Nian to begin shortly. And again, there's he really needs no introduction. He's one of the go-to persons when you want to know about energy transition, especially with what's happening in Southeast Asia, ASEAN, etc. But he's really one of the global experts we have today. So Dr. Victor Nian, thank you so much for being with us. And again, as we go along, I'll ask you also, why you co-founded the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources, what's the motivation behind that, etc. Right? But I think many of these points will anyway come up in your presentation. And after that, we'll go to Jan. Okay, so I'm going to request Dr. Victor Nian to begin his presentation. I'll remain connected. I will have my video off. Jan, I'll request you also the same so that the audience can pay attention to the presentation, and then I'll call you Jan. Okay, so thank you, and it's all yours, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And also thank you, the organizer, for having us speaking in this occasion. So my name is Victor Nian, as Jenny already introduced. My interest is in nuclear energy, and the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources is also committed in supporting energy transitions, and nuclear is one of the key things that we're looking at. So before we dive into the topic today, just allow me to do a little bit of an introduction about CSER, the abbreviation for Center for Strategic Energy and Resources. So we are an independent think and do tank, and we are headquartered in Singapore. The notion of being independent is we are not a part of any national government. We are not a part of any universities, as you would see with common institutes and think tanks that are generally affiliated to. We are independent, not-for-profit organization in this case, and we are fully registered in Singapore. And we have a global network of people from 20 to 30 countries with a core member of around 20 to 25 people as of today. So what we are here to do is we are here to build enabling energy systems that will help accelerate energy transition, and also building platforms for communicating strategic issues in energy and sustainable development with the main focus in Asia. Of course, we're also concerned about what is happening worldwide that's outside of Asia. Knowledge and innovation is what we believe strongly, because we think knowledge and innovation and technology development, and in this case, solutions should not be bounded with borders. In fact, the best that the world can offer should always be shared equally among all populations in the world today. Right, as I mentioned, we have experts now from 50 plus countries with an extended network with a partnership with the professional society. We honor independent, evidence-based, and also unbiased views on issues. And we also very much welcome thought-provoking questions, challenges, and views that would help help with the debate in energy transition. And being a think and do tank, we not only think, where we provide high-level strategic advisories, we also work very closely with industry to look at what solutions that is up and coming, what solutions that have already become available, so that we map out that ecosystems and promote or help countries recognize what are the nationally appropriate solutions that is relevant and that should be rolled out for the country to achieve its energy and decarbonization goals. And we think nuclear is always a part of the bigger mix or the bigger matrix that will help country achieve decarbonization. So historically, if you look before the 1990s, nuclear energy has been accelerating or growing really fast. So those days from the then Soviet Union, from the US, and also UK and France, we see a rapid scale up of nuclear energy. And nuclear energy at peak, if you see a chart, was supplying somewhere around 16% to 17% of the total energy as produced from, for example, coal, gas, and renewables. And it has been steadily declining after the 90s, where we see a global slowdown in the Western, if we may call it Western world, in mostly in Western Europe and North America. But then things has picked up in Asia, which I will show you in the next slide. However, there was also this Fukushima accident that brings another hindrance to nuclear energy development just across 2011, where many countries in Southeast Asia were at the verge of making a major decision of building nuclear power plant. So I may dare to say, if Fukushima didn't happen in the region, the region would have had its first nuclear power plant by now already. And so, from the perspective of the global nuclear reactor development, what has happened in the past? And we see quickly a rapid scale up in the US, and this is where we call it the generation 1 and 2 type of nuclear power plant, water-based or pressurized water reactor. Then Soviet Union also started, now today is Russia, UK also started, all in the very early days. And then after 3 Mile Island, this is when it was the time it happened. And after Chernobyl, this is roughly when it happened. There was a drastic slowdown of new build constructions in the Western world. But technology has already become global by then, especially the pressurized water reactor that was developed by Westinghouse. And it gets transferred to Asia. So Japan, Korea, then China all started scaling up their domestic market. And so the number of nuclear reactors has still been rising. China now today is the leading country that is building new build constructions. So in terms of a global statistics, what we are seeing is right now there are about 423 reactors in operation, somewhere around 380 gigawatt that is presently in operation. These numbers are important and you will see why. And 56 reactors are being constructed as of today. That will add about 60 gigawatt in the years to come, maybe a decade from now. Why the number is important? The number is important when we are looking at what the net zero carbon emission mean to the world. So before this whole 2050 net zero carbon emission agenda being kind of committed or adopted or recognized as a timeline or deadline for the world to reach carbon neutrality, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, has already pointed out that the world needs to reach zero carbon emission by 2100 if we are interested or if you're serious about the 1.5 degree C target. And the IPCC has run all kinds of scenarios from different models. Their GCAM model, these are top-down, high-level models. The message model, this is more of a bottom-up, modeling the different type of demand, for example, lighting, air conditioning, electricity use, transportation, power generation, industry, manufacturing, etc. And then there's this remind model, which is another kind of model that also considers the global energy economy. Unanimously, all 3 models, let's not worry about all the fancy lines and where they lead to, pointing to the same story. If we want to achieve a carbon net zero or achieving the 1.5 degree C target, renewable and nuclear will need to have a substantial share in the global energy mix. And we are not supposed to have any fossil fuel. And we shouldn't have any fossil fuel in the carbon neutral world. And so that's the modeling part from the IPCC. And then the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, or OECD NEA, they have done a subsequent analysis to look at, okay, if the IPCC's 1.5 degrees C were to be met, and then nuclear has that role. So how does that translate it into the capacity that the world needs when it comes to having sufficient nuclear energy to decarbonize the global energy system? And that means we need 1,160 gigawatt. Just now, how much do we have? Just a brief recap. We have about 380 plus another 60. So that gives us about 400, gives us about 440. We are nearly 3 times short of the capacity that's needed to achieve the 1.5 degree C target. And the IPCC analysis was drawn to 2100, whereas the OECD NEA's analysis was drawn up to 2050, right? And today we're already looking at 2023, so coming to the 2025 mark, and we're only left with 25 years, if not less, to reach a scale of 1,160 gigawatt. And then if you start, reflecting back of what has happened in the early days, right? So first of all, of course, we are all trying out different kind of designs. The early first generation prototype to demonstrate that nuclear energy can work, nuclear power plant can generate electricity. There's longer construction time. By the time when it comes to second generation during scale up, we're also seeing delays in construction, rising costs, right, escalation in interest. So the question was then already raised is large scale nuclear power plant, can they meet the promise that nuclear energy should deliver in terms of energy and climate objective or environmental objective? After Fukushima, we see a lot of the emergence of generation 3 plus to say that, oh, these designs are supposed to be Fukushima proof. At the same time, we see the emergence of small modular reactors. A number of companies are working on it. Today, we're also happy to have Seaborg, will be Jan, who will be talking about the technology that Seaborg offers, which is moving into the generation 4 as we speak today. So molten salt reactor, high temperature gas-cooled reactors, these are the so-called generation 4 type of innovative technology that is being developed today. And in China, there's already a high temperature reactor that is in operation producing electricity. And if my information is correct, they also supplied district heating to the nearby cities during this winter, the last winter. Now, is nuclear energy economically attractive? Right. So we use Singapore as a test case. Why we use Singapore as a test case? Because our load curve is relatively flat, and we do not have a strong seasonal variations, right? So, although you may say, well, this is probably an easy case for nuclear, but when you think of it, if you want to play with the liberalized electricity like we have to take advantage of the peak in having a lot of renewables and taking advantage of the lower electricity price when there's less demand during nighttime or other seasons, we don't have that big gap that we can play with. So how is LCE going to look like? So if you just look at the pure levelized cost of electricity from electricity generation perspective, we were looking at even at a assumed really high cost. So this cost estimation was partly come from the US Department of Energy estimate on the first of a kind SMR. We gave it a really high cost. And we consider a typical large size reactors and give an estimation of roughly how it will cost in Asia or Southeast Asia, with a fuel price that was relatively low in those days. So this is published in 2017. So the study was done somewhere around 2016 or late 2016. Fuel prices wasn't that high as compared to today, of course. We are seeing that nuclear energy is already quite competitive. And this comparison is done against the state-of-the-art combined cycle gas turbine technology. There we're looking at F and H class comparison. And then subsequently around 2019, we did another study to say that, okay, even if we leverage on a relatively flat load curve, we still produce hydrogen when the electricity demand is low, or we charge the batteries when the demand is low. And when the demand is high, we will just produce electricity, right? So from the different scenarios, we also look at, well, nuclear energy is actually pretty competitive if you want to look at it from the levelized cost of electricity perspective. So although you may say, oh, okay, this is not really easy to see, 5 to 6 or 5 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, depending on the different type of technology. So you have the floating nuclear power plant, you have the HTR pebble bed module, typical generation 3 and the typical generation 3 plus. So what are we looking at? So what are we looking at is if you translate the cost of hydrogen, right, converted to energy unit, we're looking at somewhere around between $2 to $5 per kilogram of hydrogen production, even with first of a kind hydrogen production, first of a kind floating nuclear power plant, supply electricity and hydrogen. And this is purely electrolysis from the typical PWRs and thermochemical decomposition of, some people call it thermolysis for high temperature gas cooled reactors. And then we went one step further to say that, okay, what if we contextualize this into the Southeast Asian situation? We said, okay, let's see how then the cost competitiveness is as compared to renewables. And then we did a life cycle analysis, techno-economic assessment modeling to compare 5 countries who had made announcement on nuclear power. And the simple conclusion is nuclear is the most cost competitive technology for ASEAN. And in this case, we haven't even factored in the cost of grid integration of renewables. Nuclear energy is already competitive. And then we were thinking, okay, today we are going for generation 4 type of technology. And it is not just a power source, but rather a relatively high quality energy source. It has heat, it can produce heat and electricity. And because you have 2 types of energy output, you can then use it to generate or to support the multiple use cases. In this case, from our initial estimations, you could actually achieve all of that if we conceptualize this so-called multi-utility floating complex, right? So you have the floating nuclear power plant supporting producing heat and power, and having an integrated industrial cluster to produce hydrogen, ammonia, water desalination, other chemicals. And you could also use the waste heat to produce additional power or to power a refrigeration cycle to produce cooling. So that can use for example, data center. Essentially, we are turning this concept into an offshore floating industrial park that is carbon-free by design because it's all powered from nuclear energy. So that is also a concept we are promoting or developing in the regional, in the future will also be in the global context to look at how do we then revolutionize future industrial park design in places where land is limited. We may think that some countries have sheer vast amount of land, but when it comes to urban development or industrial development, land is always limited. It's not just Singapore, not just Southeast Asia, but everywhere else, right? And with floating industrial park, everything is self-contained, self-managed. There's a lot of autonomy in it, and it also gives the ownership model or business model for the onshore facility more flexibility as to how they want to do it, whether it's ownership model or whether it's energy contract model, right? And because this is cutting across both nuclear industry, the manufacturing industry, and maritime industry, we can also expect new policy and regulatory framework to be developed. And in that sense, it's also innovation to how to make the entire governance of energy or energy transition together with technology or industrial development. And that combined as a whole package, what we believe will form an ecosystem to help accelerate energy transition. So this is what we are working on, and that is what I want to speak today. If you want to find out more about our ecosystem and what we're working on about strategic insights on energy transition, get in touch. Thank you very much.
Dr. Victor Nian, this was really fantastic. You've taken some very big concepts and tried to simplify it for all of us. We're getting in questions already, but I'll hold on to that for a little later. Okay, so what I'd like to do is actually tie this in very well with Jan Holm's presentation. So Jan, you can come online again. You can have your video on. And while he's doing that, let me also introduce Jan. So Jan is really the genesis for this webinar, because the conversation that I had with him sparked my interest in nuclear once again, because otherwise, you know, what you mentioned, Fukushima, Chernobyl, all these images, I'm also, you know, quite old to realize the Chernobyl kind of, you know, many of the younger generation may not know what we're talking about, but Fukushima certainly is there, and it's a real scenario, right, that has played out. But, you know, I didn't even know that there's something called generation 4 in nuclear generation, power generation. So I think, again, Navozyme is, as our tagline says, transforming maritime ahead of time. So true to that mission, you know, we've got Seaborg, which has sea, and there's a maritime component here as well with the nuclear generation. So, and it's, I think, a little bit, hopefully not too ahead of time. It's already time for Seaborg to, you know, to make inroads. So Jan, over to you. And Jan is also, you know, supporting Navozyme for quite some time. He's now formally accepted our invitation to become an advisory board member, and we really value his guidance and friendship. So Jan, over to you about you know, Seaborg and how generation 4 is really different from the earlier nuclear power generation. So over to you, and then we'll have a you know, more fluid conversation here.
Okay, thank you, Anjaney. Thank you, Victor. Really appreciate it. If you don't mind, I'll just share my screen here
Yes, please go ahead.
with my presentation, so we can go. So Victor talked a bit about the landscape, and that was, of course, the entire idea. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, now it's fantastic. Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to talk a bit about is more about how are we going to make this happen. And I did a very quick calculation when Victor was saying that we need to get to 1160 gigawatts, and with 440 in the pipeline and existing, the gap would be 720 gigawatts. That would be 900 of our biggest barges. So thank you for that. I think I have a market to go for. Just briefly about Seaborg. So Seaborg is founded in 2014. It came out of the Danish Technological University, where the founders were looking into how to solve the climate crisis. We are privately held and privately funded for now, and I'm saying that because we are doing the funding round and getting institutional investors in as we speak. The company has grown since I started advising them 3.5 years ago from 10 people to more than 120 employees. We have more than 30 PhDs in material science, nuclear physics, and chemistry in our company. We are headquartered in Copenhagen, Denmark, but we also have offices in Singapore and Korea. Singapore from a regulatory perspective and a business development perspective, and Korea because we intend to build our barges and also long-term some of our nuclear power plants. What we've done well, I think, is we have forged strong partnerships with big players in Korea. So we have a partner in Samsung Heavy Industries who are designing our barge, and we just got approval in principle on the barge design earlier this year. And then we have Korean Hydro and Nuclear Power, which is the third largest operator of nuclear power plants in the world. They were also, together with their parent company, KEPCO, they were the company that helped UAE become a nuclear nation. So we work very tightly and closely together with these guys to develop our nuclear power plants. So going back to these physicists from the university, they came up with a vision, which was basically, or a need to say, we will only be able to reach our goals for decarbonization if we can come up with an alternative which is cheap and cheap enough. And I'll come back to levelized cost and cost of hydrogen a bit later on. I saw there was a question on that and that's important for us because we fundamentally don't believe in subsidies. We only think we can make this happen if we can make it competitive. The other part which is important is this about scaling fast, and that's where the shipyards come in. We have this idea that we want to piggyback on the shipyard's ability to produce and reproduce the same structures and mass produce them and basically spit them out. That is also part of how we can bring down the delivery time to our target delivery time of 3 years from contract sign. So the vision is basically what the physics agreed to was that small modular nuclear reactors, and in our case, a molten salt reactor, is a way to decarbonize. So we're building and designing these barges with nuclear power plants on top of them in the way where we can compete with fossil fuels. And the reason why I'm sitting in Singapore, we do see Southeast Asia as our prime market. We have an economy that's growing rapidly. We have strong decarbonization commitments all over the region. We have a situation where a 3-month-long monsoon is affecting wind and solar. There's not that much wind actually in a belt 1,000 kilometers north and south of the equator. And we don't really have room for solar. There's limited opportunities for hydro. We don't have a lot of high altitude rivers, and there's also only some places where we can develop geothermal. So that basically leaves us in the region to rely on coal, oil, gas, and coal, or the only other dense energy source would be nuclear. And that's where we see the market opportunity and approaching Southeast Asia. So a bit about the concept. If you look at the reactor to the left, it's a compact molten salt reactor. And to put it in scale, you can see a small person to the left. Basically, this is a 100 megawatt electric nuclear reactor. The person there is to scale, and the reactor actually fits into a 20-foot container. So the idea is to build them, mass produce them. We are using a molten salt reactor, and just to give you a bit on the safety side of that, it runs like a conventional fission reactor. Instead of water, we use a salt, which is a rock below 490 degrees. We melt it, so it's a molten salt reactor. We melt it and operate it at 600 to 700 degrees. So what does that mean in terms of safety? It means that if there is some kind of spillage, that's for some reason the reactor cracks open and the salt, including the nuclear material, escapes, it will start to solidify immediately. First of all, it's too heavy to create a nuclear cloud. So the effect will be just locally within a radius of a few hundred meters. The salt that comes out on the barge or onto the ground will solidify within 60 seconds from the outside in, and if it falls into the water, it will be like a lava explosion. So what does that mean? It means that you can place it close to cities. You can place it close to industrial facilities, like Victor mentioned before, the industrial park. For Singapore, it means that we can actually have a bunch of those sitting out at Pulau Hantu, where we today have or Bukom, where we today have the refineries. And even in the worst case scenario, we'll still have a situation where we can sit here in Singapore and continue our life. Yes, it will be a big job to clean up after it, but fundamentally, it doesn't destroy the livability of Singapore. The energy compactness also means that not only has it the potential to make Singapore net carbon zero, that would require around 2.2 square kilometers of seabed. It can actually turn Singapore into a net producer or net exporter of energy by just doubling this number. So we will mass produce these reactors in Korea in the beginning, but over time we'll have to spread this out to yards throughout the region. We designed them in 4 different sizes. The smallest has 2 reactors on it, and then it comes with 2, 4, 6, and 800 megawatt electric. To just give you an idea of what does that mean, 200 megawatts is enough to power 500,000 households. And again, I have a lot of my statistics from Singapore. There's 1.4 million households in Singapore. So the smallest parts can power 1/3 of Singapore's households. It also solves an issue with energy security that we've seen during the war. It has a fuel cycle of 12 years and a capacity factor of 90 plus. And of course, it has a zero emission, so we get to the net carbon zero. So if we look at I talked a bit about the inherently safe. It cannot melt or it cannot explode. It operates for 12 years. And there will be no spent fuel handling through the 24 years. So it operates for 12 years, then we will refuel it. And then there will be another 12 years, and then we come and pick it up and handle the parts, including the fuel, so the host country does not have to deal with that. So it's a fundamentally different reactor. It's interesting we call it a new kind of reactor because it was actually developed by Glenn Seaborg, of our name, back in the 60s, and it was operated and worked quite well. So one side of what we're doing is very focused on the technology and bringing that to the market and maturing it. But the other part for nuclear, which is important and difficult, is the regulatory side. So what we're working on in Korea is to have a licensing in Korea. As we put it on a barge, we will have to go on and comply with the maritime rules under the IMO. Now it is so that International Atomic Energy Agency is also a UN organization, and some of the big classification societies, aside from verifying the certifications and safety of ships, they do the same for nuclear. So we will be using, in our case, ABS, to help us verify the safety and integrity of both our nuclear barge and our nuclear reactor on the barge. Then we will be working with the flag states, quality flag states to place them. The UK has just opened up for their flag registry in December last year. So now we can actually flag nuclear barges and nuclear propelled vessels under the UK flag. The US and Canada is working on it. And I just understand that Korea is also starting to work on it from last week. So what does that mean? What's the benefit of all this? If we look at conventional nuclear, you will have to get a licensing, not only for the site evaluation, but for the tech, for the construction and the commissioning. In our case, we will standardize the commissioning side, part of it. We will standardize the construction side of it, and we'll standardize the tech evaluation side of it. So it can be treated a bit like an offshore oil and gas structure or facility, an oil rig that you bring into national waters. You of course have to comply with that. You have to find the correct site for it, but you will also have to comply with local port state requirements. But it's a much simpler process to do so. And I have dialogues in the region with several of the potential regulators for this. And what I've heard from all of them, this is a model they can see would work. If we come with a model where we have a Korean licensing, which they seem to trust, verified by a good classification society under a quality flag, then we can bring it in, have actually cleared all of the international part of the licensing, and what is left to do in order to implement this is the site evaluation and making sure that we have a suitable site. So this licensing approach, this maritime licensing approach, is what unlocks this technology to the region within the next 5 years or 6 years instead of the next 20 years. So in brief, build it and fully commission it in Korea. We can deliver 3 years after contract signing, and we will bring it to anywhere in the world where you need it, and it's fully tested and commissioned and ready to operate. Now, I know that not a lot of people want to have a nuclear power barge in their backyards, and it's of course because you can use it for a number of things. So the power barge, as delivered, will produce electricity. The electricity, of course, we can use to power the grids, but we can also use it for hydrogen production, which again, if combined with nitrate, can produce ammonia. Ammonia, again, you can use it as a marine fuel, an energy carrier, or fertilizer. And the hydrogen, you can use it for industrial applications. We have dialogues with steel mills. We have dialogues with cement factories. And of course, you can use it for air and road and air transportation. And again, generation of electricity. So, as I said in the beginning, one part was the scaling fast, and here's where our shipyards come in. But the other part is to be cheap and cheap enough. And what we've done a large feasibility study in Vietnam where we looked at placing barges on 8 locations around the coast. We had done a full bottom-up cost estimation, including land lease, grid integration, fuel, operation, staff cost, everything. And we end up at a levelized cost for electricity of 30 to 40 euro. Now, if you look at the markets in the region, the Vietnam is around 85, Indonesia on the lower end is about 85, and the Philippines go all the way to 200. And I can tell you very bluntly, with anyone that I've spoken to about the region, I know it's competitive, and I actually have no pushback except that this is interesting to them. What we also did in the same study was we also looked at the landed cost of hydrogen, and there we end up on 2.4 euro per kilo, which is about 20% more expensive than if you make it from LNG, but this is carbon neutral. It's as opposed to the LNG. We're not entirely there at the same price, but we will get there. So in short, we're developing in Denmark. We're building it at shipyards, initially in Korea, but over time all over the world. And of course, the idea is to build a project or a product that we can easily export and bring to the world. All right, I'll leave it here. I have spent my 10 minutes, actually 13, so I'll leave it here and take questions from you.
Yeah, and again, thanks so much for showing what's coming, not in the very distant future, right? So this is great.
Yeah.
And also
maybe that one I would like to mention. So on the timeline, because that's a misconception that I hear again and again, that the timeline for these small modular reactors are 2030, 2035, maybe even 2040. We expect and are determined to deliver the first nuclear power parts in 2028. And from that point on, we can start mass producing. So we're not talking about something which is 10 years or 15 years in the future. We're talking about something 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And this 5 years is not a long timeline for a power plant. Even wind turbines and normal conventional power plants, it's not a long time. And when we got our production up and running, it's 3 years from contract signing, fully tested and ready to operate, and that will be extremely competitive.
No, that's very fast, actually. You know, next week we have the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, which is for startups, etc. And they have an entire section which is called 4 years from now. Okay, and why do they have that? Because basically, you've got to get things out within that timeline. So you're doing really well with something so complex. So here I'd like to actually use the remaining time, around 15 minutes or so, and I'll again invite Dr. Victor Nian to join this conversation, and we'll pick up some of the questions also that we are already getting, okay? But just to set the stage, again, the summary from, at least for me as a non-expert of nuclear, but with a large interest in the energy transition, what I'm seeing is it's not a question of whether you like it or not, but if you're really serious about achieving this goal of reduction in 1.5 degrees Celsius, and again, some are aiming for even higher, 2 degrees, etc. We can't achieve it. It looks like that without nuclear being part of the equation in a big way. Now, the reason it has also declined, and Dr. Victor, you've shown this very clearly, right? From this 16% high to around 10% right now. And again, it's because, the images we saw some decades back, it scares people, right? So let's address the safety issue first, because without that, really all the other things are not going to. And at the end, nuclear has a political component, right? Because people, the average person on the ground who doesn't understand all the scientific data very well, when they have to vote, they'll say, hey, no nuclear, because I remember my grandmother or great-grandmother, something being affected, right? It's a story that's very nice to flash. So let's address the safety aspect here. So Jan, what I understood is you're firstly saying that there's no cloud. So most of the problems come because when the reactor breaks for whatever reason, or there is a emission, this goes in the air, and because it goes in the air, it spreads all over the place for tens of kilometers, sometimes even larger areas, right? Depending on wind patterns, etc. What you're saying, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're using a completely different ingredient, molten salt. And so if it leaks, it basically is going to just, coagulate and stay in one place. It won't even move, right? So contamination is very, very restricted. So that's one safety aspect. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on this point, any one of you, if I've got it right or not?
No, it's completely correct. So the salt has a number of inherent safety features in it. So one is it's heavy, so it can't form a nuclear cloud. Second is that it solidifies really, really fast the moment it escapes. And just to be clear, the reactor doesn't just crack. I mean, we're talking about someone taking a bunker buster that can penetrate 60 centimeters high tensile steel that's surrounded by in order to just get close to the reactor. So it's not something that just happens because someone drops something on it. So if the salt and the nuclear material escapes the reactor, it will stay localized, and to the degree that the fluoride salt and nuclear material binds very well, and it doesn't release the nuclear material. So that's one nice thing of this salt. The second part is that the salt boils at 1500 degrees, and as you may have noticed, I said we operate at 600 to 700 degrees. And of course, one of the worries with previous accidents is that reactors overheat. So the thing is here that when the reactor starts going significantly higher than the 600 to 700 degrees, the salt expands, and you have something which is called a negative coefficient. Basically, it's like gravity. When the temperature comes too high, the atoms spread, it slows down the fission process, and the temperature goes down again. And the safety margin till it boils, it operates at atmospheric pressure. The safety margin is 1500 degrees where it boils. So you will never ever get close to a scenario where your reactor overheats. The second part that can happen is, of course, a blackout for the parts for whatever reason. So the way we handle that is at the bottom of the nuclear reactor, there's a freeze plug. Basically, you have liquid nitrogen blasting at the freeze plug. The moment you have a power out, it stops blasting nitrogen. The freeze plug will thaw and disappear. The salt will go down into drain vessels, and it will stop the nuclear process again. So you have some, and all of this is not by mechanics. It's by laws of physics or lack of power to trigger this. So, but that's the technical side of it, and
it's good. What you just said is, again, without getting too technical, but I just wanted to make sure the audience understands that we're talking of something fundamentally different from what we have seen historically, right? Here also, just to close this loop, because at the end, yes, nuclear power is splitting of atoms. We're talking of fission. And fusion has also been out in the news now, but I guess that is something which is decades away, right? Or really, it's still much in the future. But here, this is a question from me for Dr. Victor. Can you tell us what are the waste, if any, and what is really the fuel that is used in these, in the modern systems today?
Yeah, I think that question should go to Jan. He knows the nuclear, he knows the molten salt reactor better than I do, but let me try first. So predominantly there's only one type of fuel that we're dealing with today. That this is in the light water reactors, right? Whether they are pressurized water reactors or the boiling water reactors. they use fuel rods. So the fuel is in a rod form, put into assembly, and they go through a fission process to produce heat. So what goes in is what goes out. They're always in the solid form. So that's uranium dioxide. And when fission takes place, uranium becomes transuranic. We call it transuranic waste. Right? So this includes plutonium and also some other radioactive nuclei that will decay over the next millions of years. Right? So in terms of waste, what you're really getting, if you put your hands into the nuclear reactor and grab a few rod out, then it's plutonium plus unfinished uranium and some other radioactive nuclei. But nobody does that. You can't possibly even put your hand into the reactor and pull anything out. And when we're really talking about nuclear waste, we are not really saying that these are just waste that goes to a trash bin and then you have a dump truck and then they throw into underground. We're not really doing that. So even if you go to the waste storage site in the US, what they're doing is the doors are not, they're never locked. I mean, they're guarded, but they're not locked. So what we're waiting for is for example, fast reactors, so that they can continue to burn this spent fuel or waste from the conventional light water reactors, so we can get more juice out of the same orange. And then we can incinerate more of these long-lived radioactive nuclei. So to bring the so-called waste, radioactive waste from millions of years of storage down to a few hundred thousands of years. We are still saying that that's still insane, but then going from millions of years to thousands of years is a one big step. And then also in some reactors, for example, the plasma reactor, you will go through a vitrification process to basically fix all of this waste, so you can't get anything out, right? So molten salt reactor fuel cycle is very similar. You will also have the transuranic waste because you're using uranium as the fuel. There will be plutonium in it, so there's always a concern about safeguards. But when it comes to actual waste management treatment, usually there's an onboard chemical plant that does the purification processing. But I think I should leave that to Jan to explain this part.
Yeah, here actually this ties in with the question that Malcolm Jacqueline is asking, and it's really related to you mentioned this life cycle for the barge. So what happens after, in the sense, how do you deal with the waste, etc.? Maybe you can also include that in your answer, Jan.
Yeah. So one of the value propositions that we have for the companies and the governments, the host country, is the way we structure our contracts with our fuel providers is actually that they will take it back and recycle it forwards. And then there will be different ways to do it. As Victor says, we can store it and wait for new reactors that can burn this type of waste and reuse it. But we'll basically take it off their hands.
Got it. Thanks again for clarification here, because again, today's circularity is very important at the end, so we want to make sure whatever we are doing new actually has no waste. Yeah. There are quite a few questions from Mr. Pankaj Porwal from Hafnia, who's a sustainability person, and some are actually, I think it's more clarifications on the presentations here. So things like maybe the question we can take is really related with the cost. Okay, so hydrogen versus all the other alternatives. Is it so? Can you just give us a comparison here? How nuclear versus hydrogen, which is one of the energy sources that we've seen that people are betting on, especially in maritime. I saw in the port of Rotterdam, for example, they're already building systems to use green hydrogen, etc. What's your stance on that? So especially from a cost perspective.
Yeah. So basically the hydrogen processing facility, where the power, I think the differentiating power, thing is the power. So in the power to X, we always talk about hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol on the X side, and then there's the processing facility, that's the T, and then there's the power part of it, and nuclear is one of the P's. Wind, solar could be another. So what we've seen is that if you use nuclear with a capacity factor of 96, then you can actually run your processing facility at almost 100% utilization. And what we see from our discussion with vendors in this space is that your utilization is more or less proportional or opposite proportional to your utilization. So if you run at 20% utilization, your cost will be 5 times higher. So when we look at and that's why nuclear has its, so when we are looking at setting up these facilities and we have these discussions around the region, we're always working on a concept where you have dedicated power for the processing facility. And that's the way we can bring down the cost to these 2.4. The benchmark, as I gave in my presentation, was €2 for if you create it out of LNG, but that's not green, or it has CO2 emission. So if you have a wind turbine facility where the wind blows 30% of the time, you can triple that price.
Got it. Anything you want to add, Dr. Victor, on this, on the cost factor?
Okay, so the cost that you see in my slides, they are just estimates, and we are making a very conservative estimate of the first of a kind nuclear, first of a kind hydrogen plant, and then bring all the investment all up front. So it's a very conservative estimation. It's on the very high side. So in fact, when the cost goes down for nuclear reactor and the cost goes down for scaling up electrolyzers, this is definitely not the cost. So the point to make is that we don't have to wait. If you want to have hydrogen today, that cost is high, but it's not unreasonable. So $2 to $5 is something that we can already take today if you want hydrogen, and that's green hydrogen to begin with. So that's the estimation of how this $2 to $5 came about. And at $5, I can tell you the assumed discount rate was 20%. So if you understand discounted cash flow, that's how we calculated the $5.
Got it. Thanks for that. So again, conclusion here is it's competitive and it will go down over time, right? But it's needed. And it's comparable with the green alternatives that we have, if it's truly green. So that's good. Now, there are a number of questions. We may not be able to answer all of them, but what I will promise, so keep letting your questions come in. I will send the questions to both of you, Jan and Dr. Victor. Feel free to respond directly to them, because I think there are some, this could actually feed into some of the work that you're doing as well for your research, or who knows, as a client in the future. But I think you both can also see the questions. Yes. So is there some question that you actually want to answer right now, Jan, that you prefer to, because there are many that I think we can take later. But for example, there's a direct question for Seaborg, for Europe, from Pedro Alves, which mentions, So
what to just you can mention the question, then I can try to answer it.
Yeah, so it says for Europe, what is your target till 2030? What are you expected, LCOE for that region? Okay, and then when do you expect to have certification to start selling the barges, which is connected with, is there any molten salt reactor already in operation? I think you mentioned that, but perhaps you can elaborate,
Okay, so going back to one of my slides, we standardize 3 out of 4 components, and where the only differentiating factor is the site and the site approvals. Basically, the reactor itself, the fuel, the production cost, the operation. There is of course some manpower related differences, but it's very, to a large degree, in international markets to operate, even on the labor side. And the labor cost is minuscule in this bigger scheme. It's so small, you can't believe it. So that it's not a big differentiating factor whether that's in Asia or in Europe. So it's a siting cost that will make the difference whether we end up at €30 or €40. And that could be Japan. The land cost can be extremely high. It can be high other places as well. It depends on, but that's the kind of the variable factors on it, because we standardize everything else. So in Europe, the LCOE might be in the higher part of the band, whereas other cheaper locations, it might be lower. Then to part of the certification. So as I mentioned, we expect to have the first one operating certified in 2028, and then we'll be taking orders already early on, of course, conditional to licensing and certification. But then we can actually start producing them and bringing them out 2029, 2030, and onwards. So that's timeline on it. And whether it's so we've looked at Southeast Asia because of the conditions that I spoke about earlier on, that there's not really a big potential for wind, solar, geothermal, or hydro. And then you're left with oil, coal, and gas, and nuclear. That's the reason why we looked at Southeast Asia. But we do have dialogues, several places in Europe, several places in Africa as well.
Yeah, no, this is very good. So here, I'm just conscious of the time. And again, I think you addressed most of the questions, either in the presentation. And again, I repeat, all the audience can have access to the slides as well. So you can go into more detail if you need some more clarifications here. We'll also share these questions with the panelists. So I just want to wrap this up with one or two closing questions. We may run a few minutes over, but I don't want to go too much over. I think that's important. So here for Dr. Victor Nian, firstly, you gave us a very comprehensive picture of the energy requirements in the world, the different studies being done all over the globe. And they all conclude that you can't really escape from nuclear. In fact, you should embrace it, because it today, as Jan has shown, through a very concrete example, there are all the issues that were there have been resolved, right? So this is really a good alternative. Again, I don't want to paint a very rosy picture, because many times when we do new things, other new things crop up, right? So this is also going to be always work in progress, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, just because something historic happened, right? We should learn from that and move on. So Dr. Victor Nian, one question for you, like what you've set up is really very important in the world today, not just in Southeast Asia. As the co-founder of the Center for Strategic Energy and Resources, tell us why you set that up. What is really your goal behind this? And it's set up as a not-for-profit organization. So again, there's no real financial incentive here, but what are you trying to achieve?
Right. So just a bit of history of this center. So we started off in 2018 as a team of energy modelers. So we look at long-term strategic scenario planning, and we're all interested in looking at how to help the government in making the plans and the high-level strategies, et cetera, et cetera. And I came from a government-linked think tank. Before this center, I was working for a government-funded organization in which you do not know anything about what I did, how I helped the government, and whatsoever that I knew I kind of engaged in works with that. And it's very much a disconnect with the industry, because it's very much government focused, right? You look at decarbonization strategy. So I actually led the team to work on Singapore's NDC commitment. Now I can say it after 10 years, but I couldn't 10 years ago, right? And then because of this disconnection, it's always difficult for us to work very closely with the industry, which we all collectively believe is where actions will take place to support policy decisions. And then the pandemic came. And because of this network of people that we used to work with, finding it difficult to interact, and countries are very protective to want to retain the funds within their own, within the territorial borders. It's very difficult for international collaborations and help, to break down the barriers. In fact, the barriers are so high, we couldn't even, have even workshops. So then we decided we need to have a physical setup. Then I met Jan. We bounced off this idea to say we should have a physical center, and we need to stay close to the industry while helping the government. And the best way to help the government is not to work for the government, but to work with the government. And the way to also help countries is to break down barriers. So that's why we believe in knowledge and innovation without borders. So everything we need to break down boundaries so that the best can be brought to this world. And that spirit, basically, I don't want to use the word dictate, but it's basically the governing principles of us founding the center so that we bring the best solutions, not always the most so-called, the most innovative, the drastic innovation, but really nationally appropriate decisions. But looking at individual countries in Vietnam, in Singapore, in different countries, what do they really need in terms of solutions that is available today, and the kind of solutions that might happen in the future to lay out this whole energy transition strategy for countries. And then by saying that we have a strategy for the country, we also know what we're talking about because we're working with the industry. We know what is happening on the ground. For example, in hydrogen, we will know what problems what you're facing today, what kind of solutions we can bring to them, what are the opportunities in R&D, and how the countries can make a difference if they embark on a hydrogen journey. So that really is the spirit of how the center is operating and will operate in helping countries with the energy transition, a very much ecosystem approach.
Fantastic. No, really, I commend you for the vision, and I'm not surprised at the end that Jan has also played a role somehow, because he's a pioneer. And Jan, I give you the last word on this in this webinar. But what I do want to say is, you're also, with Seaborg, what you're doing is you're taking the maritime industry, you're merging it with nuclear energy again, and the green decarbonization that the world needs. So it's really fantastic to see these things coming. You've really mapped out the different hurdles that come along the way, and not in the least the regulatory frameworks. That is very important if this has to work in the future and scale up. So Jan, what would you say to this audience as your final concluding remarks?
Obviously I would say keep an eye out for nuclear. And not only us, I mean, there's a lot of other companies out there that are doing a fabulous job and coming up with interesting concepts. And I think we will have some use cases that will be really, really good for certain things, and others will for others. I mean, obviously ours can't be placed in the middle of Australia, so kind of locked on ourselves out of that market. But there's a few misconceptions. The one, when there is safe versions of nuclear, it's always been safe, and if you look at any statistics, it's more safe than any other type of energy that we have. So that's one thing. The second is it's coming much faster than we think. I mean, we are much closer to being able to provide this in big scale and to make a big difference. I mean, this one yard that we're working with in Samsung can produce 40 of the big parts a year. That's 32 gigawatts. I mean, that's more than half of what's today in the pipeline for nuclear. So the thing we have with this shipyard model, and thanks to the maritime industry, actually found a way where we can scale this really, really fast. And keep an eye on it for nuclear. I saw for the maritime side as well. We are looking at different use cases. We have found ways where we on one facility can produce 4,000 tons of methanol a day. That's big amounts. It's enough to fuel large vessels. And one constraint in this market is to get enough CO2 in one place. So keep an eye open for it. Follow us on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. Reach out if you have more questions. And I'm happy to engage.
Thanks, Jan. Again, it's clear, nuclear should be part of the equation, and definitely I'm going to have a close watch at Seaborg. Now, this webinar, of course, has got a lot of questions. They're still coming in, and sometimes we've had a future second part webinar impromptu. So we'll see, because if we see there's a lot of interest and it requires some more depth in some other areas specifically, we can look at that, okay? Because really, this is not a one-off kind of, initiative that we are doing. But I need to conclude, and what I'll do first is to thank the speakers. So Dr. Victor Nian, thank you really for your generosity in spending time and really educating me, at least, and I'm sure the audience will agree on, what the world energy scenario looks like. Jan, again, thanks for your continued support, friendship. But again, you've opened my eyes on the nuclear front. It's really compelling what you've just shown us. So thanks for that. Now, for the audience, again, you already heard the speakers. You can connect with them. We'll share the questions that have come in with them in case they have been unanswered. But we also have a little surprise on this particular occasion. Those who have actually attended the entire session, we're giving out a small certificate. We call it the Blockchain-Enabled Electronic Certificate. So it's a BEE, Blockchain-Enabled Electronic Certificate. So we are doing also our little contribution here, but also to kind of introduce the technology. We are doing digitalization that I said, maritime certificates, many other things in facilitating the interchange of information. So watch out for this email that you will get with this PDF with a QR code, which you can scan and you can see how it works. Or you can also download the wallet if you feel excited by that. And again, feel free to stay connected. So thanks so much, all of you. This has been wonderful. You'll have the recording also for future reference. And I'm going to close this session and pass it back to my colleague Esther for the concluding remarks. So thank you so much, Jan. Thank you, Victor. It's been wonderful.
Thank you,
Take care.
Thank you, Anjaney. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, Jan. Yes.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you again to Jan Holm and Dr. Victor Nian for sharing your insights with all of us. And also thank you very much to everyone for connecting with us today. We hope you enjoyed this session and you'll soon be receiving the link of the recording via email. And also, as Anjan already commented, on this occasion, you will also receive Navozyme blockchain-enabled electronic certificates for participating on the webinar. You can follow us on our LinkedIn page so that you don't miss out on any of our updates. And well, thank you, and we hope to see you again on our next webinar.